Describe the process of releasing your first recording, as in graphic design and pressing and etc.
Okay, now once again we're talking about my first tape, not my album that came out in 1971, so just to say that. When I did my first tape, which I called, that I sent around to other people, I called it New Monterey Road Sounds. It was a massive tape which featured songs on one side and then experimental improvised music on side two. It was actually a 90-minute cassette, so it was massive. Some of the songs on side one were recent songs, and some of them I had sort of compiled from earlier recordings to send out my first tapes. It was almost like a greatest hits tape to be my first tape that I would send around to other people, showing my two different sides. One side was this sort of pop song and rock oriented stuff, and the second side was more of the experimental and improvised stuff. I had actually used, for the cover, I had actually used a printout of the record of the Roots of Madness, an excerpt of that, and each one was different. It was actually cut out of the original covers of the Roots of Madness that I then typed up on the back with the song titles and all of the information. And that was the first tape, which got good response and good feedback from other people, and that got me going well, and it showed off my two different sides of my, you know, sort of music qualities.
Can you describe your graphic design and pressing and how you, maybe how that evolved? And
well, that's changed. At first it was a real cut and paste kind of deal. Each one was handmade with different covers. Not long after that, for my second tape, which was called a Variety Show, I employed my friend Doug Cruikshank. Doug was a fine graphic designer and used to work on the KTAO program guide, and has done a lot of different graphic stuff. I got Doug to help me design the cover. He actually taught me how to get these things printed up, and they were almost like professionally done. For Variety Show and Paralyzed by the Very Thought, which were like my second and third tapes, he helped me with the design, doing the photographs, the sort of collages that we did for them, and he also helped me on Pinata Party, which was in 1986, which was a big tape release. After that, I started to learn more about graphic design myself. Of course, it was just glue stick, razor and ruler for many years, and even now in the computer age, I still prefer each cover being handmade. In fact, they all are handmade, either through stenciling, through something handmade about each one, and I like to have each one done differently on fancy paper, and keeping it low budget, but sort of with a classy design.
Great. Talk about your choice of formats for release, cassette versus vinyl, that kind of thing.
Well, for me, it was always cassette because it was the only thing. Well, the beauteous thing of cassette is that it was affordable. It was portable. You could go down and buy some blank tapes. Of course, you had to have the multi-track recorder, which cost a lot of money. I think it was, for me, I think it was $1,800 for my TIAC 4-track. So that was a lot of money. But after that, all you had to do was have a cassette deck to master and to dub the tapes. I usually had 2 tape decks because I never used the internal dubbing facility because the quality was not that good for me, so I always would record from one deck to another deck and like increase the volumes a little bit to get as much possible signal on the cassette. Of course there was still hiss, but it wasn't that bad, and I felt that it was a presentable product. So I never thought about really doing a record again after the Roots of Madness because it was just too expensive and you had to have too many on hand. The beauty of cassette is that you could make one, you could make 100. It didn't really matter. You could just do whatever you liked.
So what are the differences between, you think, between the cassette culture and those who produced vinyl?
Well, for me, it was sort of intermixed. Of course, most people were making cassettes that sent stuff for the radio show and people that I traded with, but some people sent me records as well. They were all part of the underground music scene that I thought of at the time in the 80s. Some people just decided they would spend a little more money and make records, whereas most people didn't. There was a certain legitimacy to vinyl in those days. And somehow there was a knee-jerk reaction against that with the cassette community, because it was the matter of just having this real do-it-yourself, low-budget approach that was very pleasing about cassettes.
How did the European electronic music scene affect you? How did you interact with the European scene, and how would you describe the differences between the U.S. and the European electronic music of that period?
I think my first inroads into the European scene was not only receiving tapes for the radio show, but receiving some excellent compilations from my good friend in England. His name is Andy Export, and he would do these, he called them ISC compilations, and they were full of great music, electronic, poetry, rock music, all sorts of great stuff that Andy was doing. I would contact some of the addresses in some of those tapes, plus continuing to contact people from Sound Choice and Option and other stuff, other publications. People started to just send me unsolicited tapes, and I started to, the tentacles, the roads that would lead off of that, as I would write to other people, that's how a lot of that happened, as I got in touch with people in England, in Spain, in Japan, Australia, all over the world, really, especially in Europe. The difference in the music, that's kind of hard to say. In Europe, especially in Germany, there always seemed to be an elevated level of technology. It seemed like they had a little better equipment, a little better sound, and were much more involved in the, I don't want to call it hardcore electronic music, but it was more, less rock oriented and more electronic oriented.